In this week's podcast, we're going to be talking about how gender bias could have ended up inadvertently in your brain and in your thinking. And if it has, how it could be having an impact on your leadership, your decision making, your decisions about when and how you use your voice at work, the promotions that you go for, what you think you're capable of, and what you think you're worthy of. So, pretty much everything. Welcome to episode 95 of the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today I got a bit ragey preparing for this podcast. So let's see if that comes out today. One important thing I've realized coaching successful women is how much of what used to be systemic and blatant discrimination and gender bias has morphed into something which is much more subtle. So now you're in a position where you can get the job, you can lead the team, you can become the CEO if you want to. But it's not that long ago when the dominant thoughts and the dominant ideas that shaped our society didn't allow that to be the case. Ideas like women weren't born to be leaders, their characteristics made them unsuitable for making decisions and for running things. Women shouldn't, hold jobs outside of the home. And women's contributions or ideas were generally just less valuable than a man's, even if they were worth listening to at all. And views have changed. We can see evidence all around us that women are making waves in all different fields that historically they would have been denied access to. Yes, there's still work to do, but things are changing and things have changed. However, whilst most people's views have changed, and for the people listening to this podcast, I'm sure you believe that it's possible that you can do X, Y, and Z, that you should be able to have a career, have the kind of career that you want, not be held back by gender bias or stereotypes. You're probably with me on that. Not all of the world is with us on that, but I'm guessing you're probably with me on that. But what I see in my coaching sessions with women is that, and even inside my own brain, is that those outdated gender biases and stereotypes have ended up living within our own heads. And when I'm coaching someone, they become evident. They become evident within somebody's thinking. They become evident within somebody's doubts and within their fears. Which is perfectly natural, right? If you've been told something for hundreds of years, women can't do this, women shouldn't do that, it's no surprise that once those things start to change, those more subtle manifestations of those ideas are still going to exist. That's why we talk a lot about unconscious bias now, right? That's the bias which people don't even know that they have. It's buried in the structures of our thinking. And so we're not always conscious of it. We don't always see it. And some of this gender bias is buried in the constructs of our thinking outside of our unconscious awareness, but it is having an impact. And often I see that impact when somebody is sat coaching with me. And I want to give you 4 examples of those ideas, those gender biases, which used to exist just in the mainstream and now exist a lot more subtly, which now exist more unconsciously in terms of our own thinking, our own fears, our own doubts, and our own beliefs. And obviously, we may not discuss these openly. We may not even be aware of them, but I come to be aware of them because of the privileged position I have of sitting with people in that confidential space and really hearing what their doubts and fears sound like. And I want to share some of them with you today because I want you to recognize whether some of these gender bias ideas and stereotypes have inadvertently ended up within your thinking. Have they inadvertently ended up within the unconscious mind? And are they having a subtle or not so subtle impact on you? The first of the 4 ideas is about, can I lead my way? I coach on this a lot. So I'm often coaching newer leaders or leaders who have had promotion, they're getting more and more senior. And something that people tell me a lot that they want to coach on around this is, it comes down to, can I lead my way? Their way is a certain way. And often for the people who come to me, that way is they like to listen to people, they like to respect people, they like to be collaborative, they like to be understanding of people's personal lives, issues, all of those kinds of things. And very often, I see people doubting whether within a leadership capacity or within a more senior leadership capacity, that is really the way of leading. Can I lead like that? I.e., can I lead my way? I see a lot of doubts about people's like quote unquote style. Some people might call it a leadership style, but like who I am and how I would naturally lead if I didn't have any ideas in my head about how I should lead. This is how I would naturally do it. But is that actually okay? And have you ever stopped to think about why you might be thinking this? Why might you possibly be questioning or doubting whether or not you can lead in your way? Well, I don't think we have to look too very far to find what I think is probably the answer to that. There was historically an exclusion of women from leadership positions within our culture and society. And there still isn't equal representation across all spheres, whether that's industry, whether that's politics. They are outdated gender bias and stereotyped ideas that say that women are not cut out for leadership for many reasons, all bollocks. But when you've grown up in a world that's held those views and that has taught you those views, either explicitly or implicitly, is it any wonder that some of the doubt around being a woman leader might creep into your mind? Is it any wonder? Of course, there are going to be gender biases and stereotypes which have found their way into your mind. You have lived in a world, you have swum in a soup which has included those ideas, probably since you were born. So, no surprise that you might have some doubt or some fear about whether you can lead your way. Most people will think of this as a personal issue, like they won't necessarily connect it to the wider societal impact. They won't necessarily notice that their thinking on this or their fear on this might just be informed by years of conditioning and years of gender bias. But wouldn't it be amazing if it hadn't been shaped by that? Even if you know something logically, like women make great leaders, we know that logically. But that doesn't take away from the fact that like hundreds or more years of gender biases about women and their ability to lead and command has been fed into our brains also. So there may be competing ideas even within you. And we probably, I mean, it might even be uncomfortable to admit that sometimes we're going to have gender bias ideas and sometimes we're going to be sexist, but I know I am. I've spotted moments where I've done it before, and I haven't done it because I've consciously wanted to. I've had gender bias and sexist ideas because I've lived in a society that has taught me them and taught me them well. So no surprise that when I'm coaching somebody about whether they can lead their way, we uncover these paradigms that exist in their mind and in their thinking. We uncover a fear about whether it's okay to lead in a collaborative, constructive, empathetic, sincere, authentic way as a woman, because that was not exactly prized, was it? What happens when these stereotypes, these gender biases are living in our brains without us probably really noticing it? This can have a really subtle effect. They can erode our trust in ourselves and they can erode our confidence. And if you're a women leader and you've had doubts like this, I'm guessing you already know that those doubts may have eroded your trust in yourself and eroded your confidence. It doesn't have to be that way forever. You can change it, but in order to change it, you'd have to link the fact that this stuff exists in your head, these doubts and these fears exist in your head, not because of you, not because you are not cut out for it, not because you're not good enough, and not because your style isn't good enough or doesn't work. It clearly does, and that's why you've been promoted. But because there have been so many moments in your life where you have received information, either consciously or unconsciously, about women in leadership. And somewhere along the line, that has sunk into your brain. And when we dig around in that coaching session, we're probably going to find it. So just be aware. If you've ever questioned whether you can lead with your style, it's probably nothing to do with you. And it might be a lot to do with the society and the dominant ideals that you've been raised with, even if they don't seem to be the dominant ideals now. The next idea that I wanted to share with you is emotion gets in my way, or I'm too emotional, or I need to be less emotional at work. And I coach on this fairly frequently. And it kind of ranges from I want to just care less, I just don't want to care, to I want to care, but I don't actually want to show it. And again, there are moments where we have to keep not our emotions, but our responses when we feel a certain emotion in check. Like if I feel angry at work, that's fine. But I can't then go yelling at everybody because I feel angry. Or maybe I can in some workplaces, but in a lot of workplaces, they're going to say that's not appropriate. But this isn't the kind of emotion that most of my clients are talking about putting in check. Most of my clients wouldn't dream of shouting at everybody around the office. They are not those people. And all humans are emotional. That's how humans work. We are driven by emotion, men and women. And yet, there is this held idea, this gender bias. It's a deeply ingrained belief in our society that women are somehow more emotional and less rational than men. I don't know where anyone got that idea, given men are the ones that kill people in anger, but hey ho, there we have it. There is a deeply ingrained belief in our society that women are somehow more emotional and less rational than men. And that is a bad thing, especially when it comes to our working and professional environments. So, when you are thinking that you are too emotional or that your emotions get in the way, I'm not saying that there isn't legitimately something that you want help to feel through and think through and manage. But what I am saying is that some of our ideas about how we need to be less emotional are coming from this ingrained belief in our society that women are more emotional and less rational, and therefore they shouldn't be in the workplace. And not only that, but we do know, and the research shows, that women pay more of a penalty for expressing emotion in the workplace than men do. So it's like a double bind. When I was researching for this podcast episode, I looked at this Medium article by a woman called Teresa Gill, and it was good. I'll link it. But it gives a bit of a summary about a bit of a summary from literature about the belief that women are more emotional and less rational than men. And it starts with the ancient Greeks and Romans, who talked about a wandering womb causing all kinds of emotional mayhem. And then into the Victorian era, where women were seen as, well, let's face it, rich women were seen as delicate emotional butterflies who were in need of protection. And then in early psychology, so from Freud, theories that kept the stereotype, chugging along really nicely. And he said that women were prone to hysteria because of their biology and the anatomy of their souls. So great. Then on to the 20th century, when you think about media and advertising, and that has loved to paint women as teary-eyed damsels in distress, waiting for a man to swoop in and save them from their pathetic, miserable life. And all these portrayals throughout the years, and probably many more that you can think of, have reinforced this idea that women's emotions were weakness. So they couldn't possibly handle a leadership role or a demanding job, could they? Except here you are, in your demanding job, in your leadership role, with all those years of gender bias stereotypes living somewhere within your brain. So is it any wonder that I've never coached a man on how to be less emotional at work? But oh my, I've coached plenty of women. And these are not women who go around ranting and raving and shouting and screaming. They just don't. So if you're thinking about how you need to be less emotional at work, some of your thinking is probably influenced by years of conditioning and even gender bias, which is present in the workplace now, which tells you that women are less rational and more emotional, and that is inappropriate. And if we're going to change these gender biases, we're going to make sure that we do it within our own head. Okay. So the next idea is that some version of I should really feel guilty when I'm not sticking to admin and care work and or at home. And women often tell me this. So I coach people with good careers, but there can be an associated guilt with working. That they're not around for kids if they have them. They're not around as much as they should be for other caregiving responsibilities. They might not be able to run a home in the same way. And I don't think it's any wonder that this guilt which women experience is generally one-sided. So even if there are two working parties in a heterosexual relationship, so a man and a woman, I doubt the man's feeling that much guilt about the fact that he wasn't able to pick up the children or do this or do that or care for things properly, right? There may be that may be a thing, but it is not the general paradigm, is it? We don't see newspaper articles talking about how guilty men feel about the fact that they weren't able to do as much admin and care work because of their demanding job. But we do see that about women, and we do hear that about women. And maybe every time we see and hear that about women, it's just reinforcing the stereotype. I can even remember being taught this stereotype within my own family. And you probably have been too, whether explicitly or implicitly. Again, historically, we've been told that women's roles are in the home. Women's roles are to care for homes, care for children, care for men. It's not even that far ago or long ago that there was such thing as a marriage bar. And that was the practice of restricting the employment of married women. And I don't know if this happened in all countries, but it did happen in the UK, and I think some other English-speaking countries too. Up to the late 19th century, some up to the 1970s. And this tended to be where women had been allowed, quote unquote, access to more middle class professions like teaching or civil service work. So women who worked in factories, etc., they didn't quit work when they got married. But women, for instance, who worked in the civil service, they had to quit work when they got married. Even in the army, they had to quit work when they got married. Now, I mean, if that doesn't say a woman's job, especially when she's attached to a man, is to be at home and in the home, I don't know what does. And that didn't even end that long ago. So if you experience this guilt, if you feel some of this guilt around your career and not being in a position to dedicate yourself heart and mind to home and family and caring responsibilities, just know that some of that guilt is coming from or is influenced by the years and years of conditioning which you have been exposed to, which said that that is what women are supposed to do. And now they're supposed to do it despite the fact that they have a busy and demanding full-time job. They're still supposed to do it. How many things do you hear about women juggling? Can she have it all? So if you feel some of that guilt, just know the likelihood is that it's coming from ideas which you do well to surface and have a look at and see whether you agree with. I coached someone, oh God, I guess about 18 months ago now, and she was thinking about how to rebalance home and family life. We made just a really quick pie chart to say, okay, what percentage of time are you spending with work and family now, and like, what do you want? And when she was really honest with herself, she realized she actually wanted to dedicate more time to work, not less. And the reason that she wasn't was because of the guilt she was feeling. And her husband, who was in the same position as her, was not feeling any of that guilt. So, if you're feeling guilt around your desire, if it is your desire, yes, there's a lot of people for whom it's no option. They have to work that many hours. They may have to work 2 jobs. They don't get any choice and they'd rather be at home with their kids or their family or doing something else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the moments where your desire is to do your work, your desire is to be within your career, but that gender biased idea about women and home and caring and those responsibilities is the thing that's creating that guilt. Don't let it. All right, the last idea that I have to share is something to do with women using their voices. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've coached people, and we coach on when and how somebody makes a contribution, shares an idea, uses their voice. And there's lots of different facets to this. For some people, it's just in challenging situations that they're going to find it harder and they may need a bit more support in order for them to just do that and do that confidently. But for some people, it can be, I'm in a safe environment and it's fine, but I'm still going to question whether my idea is good, whether it's right, whether it's worthy of being heard, and therefore I may not say it. Well, the first thing that I think about is the fact that in the UK, I don't know if this happened in other countries, but in the UK, women were forced to wear what they called a scold's bridle, which is like a metal contraption that would go over the head and in the mouth to prevent somebody from speaking. It's barbaric. Google it and look at a picture of it. So women who talk too much would be made to wear a scold's bridle. And I even remember there being jokes to me when I was a kid, because I was loud, about if I'd have been born back in those days, I would have been wearing a skull's bridle. And I was like, yeah, I definitely would have. Probably having fruit thrown at me in the local square as well. But there is such a history of women's voices being quiet, silenced, shamed, criticized, demeaned, belittled. And when I think about the history of voting, even, that traditional place in society kept women out of the political sphere. Even since, like, we have a democracy in Britain, even since democracy was established, women's, voices were kept out of that sphere because they were seen as physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally inferior to men. And it was felt they couldn't be trusted to vote rationally. A woman's sphere of influence should be in the home, should be raising children, and public life and politics was to belong to the male sphere of influence. And women didn't need to vote, right? Their husband took that responsibility, and women really weren't even capable of understanding politics, right? They were the dominant ideals. They were what generally people thought. Yeah, there always would have been people who knew that was rubbish. But when I think about that basic ability to use your voice in order to select the government who you will be governed by, women were even told, no, you can't do that. So, what chance and what hope did they have of being taken seriously for all of the wisdom that they possess? Precious little. And it wasn't until 1928, which wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things, that women in England and Wales and Scotland were able to vote on the same terms as men. And that was over the age of 21. And even now, the research shows that women are more likely to be talked over and not credited with their own ideas in the workplace. And that's workplaces that appear to be all fine as far as gender's concerned. So if you ever have a doubt about whether your idea is valid, about whether you're going to sound stupid, or about whether this is the right thing to say, just know that that doubt may not have been planted by you. That doubt may have been planted by a seed which has been growing into a huge tree somewhere inside your head For the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that women were told, wear a scold's bridle, be quiet, your view is unimportant and not equivalent with a man. You can't even vote. Your view isn't valid. And even now get talked over more and credited. Other people get credited with their ideas even when they share them. Is it any wonder that sometimes I end up coaching people who, even though they're really experienced and even though they have a lot of ideas to share, they have contributions, they have challenges, this stuff is in their mind because they are capable and they are educated and they are successful people. But there is this thing in their head which is like, oh, maybe you shouldn't say that. Maybe you're going to sound stupid. Do you really know if this is the correct answer? You'll really ruin your reputation if it's not. And when you think about the history that we just went through, and that's a potted history, right? There's loads more. Is it any bloody wonder that people question whether or not they should say something? No, it's no wonder that that happens. So if this is you, don't be blaming yourself. If you identify with any of this stuff that I've said today, for the love of God, do not be blaming yourself. Women have been doing that for too long. But do try and recognize that some of the things that we've talked through today could be living within your unconscious mind. They could be within your thinking. That gender bias might still exist within you because of all of the years where it's been spoon-fed to you. It would be amazing if it wasn't. But just notice whether it's having an impact on you. Is it causing you guilt? Is it causing you to be quiet when you don't want to? Is it causing you to think that emotion gets too much in your way? Is it causing you to question whether or not you really can do this and whether you really can lead and whether you can lead in your own way? So there's a lot of talk these days about how we shouldn't be changing women. We should be going for the roots of this systemically. And yes, I agree with that. And we should, or I realize, be letting you know what it is that I see from this privileged position that I have of sitting down with people and they allow me to rummage through their brains in order to help them and support them and to, send them out back into their workplaces to be just the badasses that they already are more easily. Tackling discrimination and bias has to happen at that strategic level, but it also has to happen at the level of our own thinking. And we need to learn to notice when thousands of years of socialization are still alive and well within our own brains. I will try and notice it all of the time. And you should try and notice it too. When has their bias become your doubts? When have their doubts become your fears? When has their BS become your worries? Probably many times. And I hope this podcast can help you to notice some of them. All right, that is what I have for you today. If you want to come and work with me, there are two options. One, you can come and do private confidence coaching with me. There is a link in the show notes, and you can click the link to book a call to explore coaching. I'm happy to talk you through whether or not I think I can help you, what your particular challenges are, and go from there. Number two, we have a newly launched membership club. And so far, I haven't really shared that much about it on the podcast or really on social media. I've mainly been sharing it with the people who are in my email list and my current clients. But we have a new thing called the Members Club. And that Members Club, we have our first call on the 13th of May. So I'm quite excited about that. The calls are in the diary for the whole year. We have a call every other week that you can drop in and get some coaching or just listen in. We have an online platform where you can access digital on-demand training to help you with loads of this stuff. And we have a private podcast. So if you like what you hear here and you think you would like to be part of a membership, a community of women getting support and guidance and just love as you navigate your career, then take a look. There's a link in the show notes. You're very welcome to come and join us. All right. I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.